What's going on, Sales Hacker community? Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker, Head of Partnerships at Sales Hacker. And the topic we're going to dive into today is how to align demand generation and inside sales to close more deals. You know, that age-old battle of sales and marketing alignment. Now, before I do introduce the two fellows to my right, I wanted to take care of a few housekeeping matters. Number one, so this will be recorded. It'll be available afterwards in case you do need to jump off, something comes up, or you want to share it out with a colleague after. As you know, if you've been on a webinar before, we do love these webinars to be interactive. So get involved, go to the little sidebar that you can see here and introduce yourself, name, title, company, and size of your sales team, and ask any questions. So for this webinar, we will be fielding questions at the end in a little Q&A session. So please be patient with us. We're going to try and get through as many as we can. And now that we have that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our two awesome guests. I'm joined by David Morrison of Ring Central and Chris Lind from Sales Scout. David and Chris, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're pumped to have you both. And just to kind of set up this conversation a little bit, let's do a quick background here. So, David, I'm going to start with you. And David, you're the Senior Digital Marketing Channel Manager currently at Ring Central. You have a ton of expertise really across all marketing functions with extensive experience managing cross-functional, international environments, including multi-million-dollar budget management. So impressive stuff. Excited to get your opinions on what we're going to go through today. And of course, Mr. Chris Lind. Chris is the CEO of Sales Scout Data with over 30 years of experience in managing and growing data-driven B2B and consumer marketing tech companies like Equifax, Experian, EDS, Neodata, so some massive companies there. So that's the formalities, though, out of the way. Let's talk some alignment strategy. So without further ado, Chris, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I thought before we dive into the details, let's establish a beachhead so we all know what sales and marketing alignment really is. Alignment occurs when both departments share common goals, processes, technology, and measurement. This allows them to monitor and optimize every stage of every deal from first touch to close deal. And it requires communication, collaboration between departments so content can be aligned to address the needs of the customer, the value prop is on point, and everyone knows what the end goals are. And the technology ecosystem we live in today enables all of that in ways we couldn't have even imagined 10 years ago. So the modern buyer today is digitally connected, mobile, and certainly has access to nearly unlimited information, people, and content. Unlike 10 years ago when marketing and sales were siloed and funnel metrics were only at the macro level, we can now drill down to very discrete measurement and track buyers' journey from start to finish. This visibility has created a more focused and analytical process we call alignment. Whereas marketing used to be responsible for filling the top of the funnel, measured in terms of lead quantity, they're now responsible for lead quality, and more often than not, they share revenue responsibilities with sales. This creates a need for a more symbiotic, trusting, and collaborative relationship between departments.
Awesome.
So
definitely. Just to backtrack there
sure.
quickly. So we're seeing obviously over the last few years, marketing is continuing to own more and more of the funnel. And like you said, they're also focused on quality, not just quantity anymore. Do you think this trend is going to continue, gentlemen, or have we kind of hit a plateau where marketing is now going to own it to the evaluation stage, and sales will keep it, or are those lines going to continue to blur?
Well, I have my own perspective. I think that we're moving into a new world where marketing is sharing a lot of the same metrics that sales is driven by. And whereas prior years, marketing was being measured by quantity of leads coming into the top of the funnel, they're now being tracked all the way down the funnel and and the same measurements, the same metrics on cost per lead and conversion rates all the way through the funnel are being shared by marketing and sales. And I'll kick this over to David, who happens to be one of our best customers. He can tell you more.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Chris. I was going to say the same thing. It's if anything, it's turning into more of a co-owned funnel all the way from top to bottom, really. Now, different orgs take leadership at different points in that process, but in terms of metrics and measurement and goals, yeah, absolutely, we are all being measured on the same metrics, top to bottom, really.
Yeah, makes sense, and it kind of goes along with this, new concept of revenue teams, where sales and marketing is so blurred that they're just working as one unit, and I think we're gonna continue to see that kind of evolve. Excellent. Thanks, guys.
So looking at some of the survey data, when sales and marketing teams are aligned, great things happen because they're both striving to capitalize on business opportunities. They may be measured differently, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to closed deals and revenue. And as you can see, the results are pretty stark. They're obvious. Surveys report 67% increase in closed deals, 36% higher retention rate, and 24% increase in growth over a 3-year period. When alignment is done right, companies see great improvement in pipeline growth and sales acceleration. However, if you go to the next slide here, you'll see that when it's done wrong, you get a vastly different set of results with far-reaching revenue impact. Up to 79% of marketing leads never convert. Half of those are ignored by the sales team because sales doesn't trust the lead source or the quality. This is the old paradigm that's been there for a long time that Scott, you even alluded to, the age-old problem, right? Worse yet, though, is that there's increased cost to sales and marketing when the company's paying for bad data. It drives up operational costs associated with marketing automation. Salespeople are wasting time chasing down leads that stand no chance of converting because the contact has changed roles or they're no longer even with the company. A staggering 10 to 12% of revenue opportunity is lost when alignment doesn't occur. So it's a hard thing to achieve, and the next slide talks a little bit about that. So the age-old paradigm where sales expects marketing to provide them with high-quality leads that have been qualified, and sales expects, marketing expects sales to qualify the leads that they've given them is changing. This whole paradigm is changing. Teams are aligning, and I think a lot of that has to do with CRM systems and marketing automation systems that have given us such finite measurement all the way down the funnel. It's a different world that we live in. But there needs to be strict adherence to CRM processes, agreed upon funnel metrics, consistency in practice. And the closer marketing aligns with sales, the better they'll understand what lead sources work best, how to streamline the lead flow, what content and value propositions work best, and how to accelerate the buying process. Different perspectives create different needs. There are different teams.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, I want to just quickly jump into something there. So there was a really startling stat to me, which I think I speak for a lot of the sales professionals that are probably listening to this, who, as sales professionals, we all want more leads. That's kind of what we think about all day is, when are the leads coming? I need more, I need more, I need more. And, that stat where it's 50% of leads are being ignored is absolutely crazy to me. You mentioned one thing, distrust of lead source is leading to that. But do you think there's something else that we're missing here? That why are sales professionals not acting on these leads?
Well, it has to do with the quality of the leads. And it's, when I was running big sales teams at Equifax, the marketing team was measured by the quantity of leads hitting the funnel. Sales was being measured by the conversions. And if the leads aren't high quality and they aren't accurate, sales is going to try them a couple times and then they're just going to turn their back on them because they aren't worth their time. So, looking at this slide, I like to say sales just wants the 10 leads that are going to convert and help them make their nut for the month, the quarter, or the year, right? Marketing, however, has a broader agenda, and they're doing branding, they're doing product launches, they're doing customer nurturing campaigns. So there's a fine balance between quality and quantity. And there's another thing that goes on in the industry, and it's most lead providers aren't real good at accuracy. We're fanatical about it because we believe that customers should get what they pay for. So, we human verify everything that goes out. And, and I think all customers should demand a higher degree of accuracy from their data vendors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's going to continue if it kind of comes down to what you're tracking and what you're rewarding for your teams, which makes total sense.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There are a couple other things that I want to point out with regards to this slide, and then we're going to turn it over to David. I assure you that marketing wants to give sales the leads, the tools, the processes that lead to increased market share and revenue. They're sharing that goal now. All this visibility into the metrics has aligned them, whether they wanted to or not. And both teams really need to get in agreement with the go-to-market strategy and what accounts they're targeting. And it's also important to develop a shared taxonomy around what's considered a marketing qualified lead, a sales accepted lead, a sales qualified lead, and everybody needs to be in sync with what the funnel metrics need to be and how they're calculated. David knows this really well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Chris. And something I was going to mention is, a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, I saw it as marketing kind of lived in marketing automation and Marketo, one of those platforms, and salespeople all lived in Salesforce. And I can tell you for me personally, I live all day long in Salesforce. I do very little in Marketo anymore. Part of that because we have a team that handles that aspect of it. But yeah, in terms of metrics, in terms of the KPIs that I keep track of, I'm in Salesforce all day long, creating reports and dashboards and things like that. So there's been a real change there where I think, as you say, we're all looking at the same metrics, working in the same tools, same processes. We all have the same goals.
Absolutely.
And when it's done right, it works well.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, probably a good point for me to jump in and talk a little bit about what we've been doing at Ring Central. I'll start by saying I started about just a little over 2 years ago. And I can tell you at that time, the two things that stood out to me about Ring Central was the sophistication of the reporting, which I'm still pretty amazed at, to be honest with you, and the working relationship between sales and marketing. Both of those were far better than I had experienced in any other company, and I've been in a few. But looking back, I can see that we did have alignment issues. We weren't completely aligned. I think we're in a far better place today, and I'm sure in the future I'll look back now and say, wow, we're doing it even better now than we did back then. But just looking back over that last couple of years, there were definitely some gaps, some things that we've improved upon. One of which is around communications. Back then, we'd start with a quarterly kickoff where I'd go over the various campaigns I'd be running that quarter, give them an idea of expected lead volume. We'd agree on some of the goals, and of course, we'd go into training about how to follow up with each of these different lead sources we would be working with in that particular quarter. And then, I would talk with the managers probably once a week. We generally had a weekly meeting, and then I might speak with certain individual SDRs 2-3 times a month, something like that. That was kind of the model. It felt pretty good, and it did work, but we've definitely improved on all of that. Another area was metrics, as we've been talking about. I was looking at leads and opportunities and Salesforce and the conversion rates between those things, and that's how I was determining success. Whereas the sales teams tended to look more into their tools. They at the time were using Front Spin and Connect and Sell, and they were looking at activities and things like that in those tools to say if they were doing well, or just kind of get a read for how things were going. So we weren't totally aligned there on some of the metrics, at least on a day-to-day basis. And then around processes, there was some areas too that definitely needed improvement. Lead routing is one. It was a big issue then. It's still a bit of an issue, but we've done some things to mitigate that. And then also just sort of leads kind of falling through the cracks. They might have been routed correctly, but the SDRs weren't necessarily seeing them all. So it really took us almost going over leads one by one, not quite to that level, but pretty close, to realize the extent of not only misrouted leads, but just leads that they weren't seeing in their lead view. And it was just, again, different ways of looking at things. I tended to look at things from a campaign view. They looked at them from a lead view. And that was another area where we found some gaps too. And then just general priorities weren't necessarily perfectly aligned at the time. Sales, as Chris was talking about, were really focused on high quality leads that they knew would convert very quickly. And then, of course, they want to know best practices for helping in that process. And of course, I wanted all that too. That all certainly suits my needs, but I also was tasked with filling the funnel. I had a certain lead volume goal to meet, and getting as many leads in there as possible was certainly a big piece of that. Not necessarily what they were looking for, unless they were all, super high quality, easy to convert leads. We all know that's almost never the case, right? And then, of course, sorry, go ahead.
I wish that was the case.
Yeah, I know.
You'd all be much happier.
Make all our jobs a lot easier, I know. And then finally, I need to understand what campaigns are working best, so I know where to spend my money, going forward. So for that, I need a real consistent use of the tools so that I can measure things correctly, and a consistent follow-up process. If a particular campaign's being followed up real strenuously with, very quick turnaround, and another's maybe the leads are sitting for a couple of weeks or something, I'm not necessarily going to get a good apples to apples comparison between those two campaigns. So I'm looking for that, a real consistent approach so that I know, campaign A is working really great. Campaign B, not so much. Maybe we spend more money next quarter in campaign A, as an example. So that's just some of the areas that, we were not necessarily totally perfectly aligned there. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify something there, because I thought it was cool that when you actually went through line by line and lead by lead, or almost lead by lead,
right.
What did you find when you took off your marketing cap and you put yourselves in, your BDR, SDR shoes. What were you finding?
No, it definitely was just finding that the way they would build their lead list, their call out list for a given day or a given week, didn't necessarily capture all of the leads that I was sending through. So and part of that was assignment, but mostly it was just a matter of not getting too far into the Salesforce weeds. Just the filters they were setting up to create their list didn't account for all of the ways they could capture the leads that should be coming their way. So by sitting down and going through that directly together, creating reports, looking through the results of those, comparing the numbers, down to like, oh, I see I have 150. Well, I see you should have 155. Where are those other 5 leads? Let's go find them, that kind of thing. We would actually just sit down and go through that until we jointly created a report that would allow both of us to see all of the leads. And then we'd have, again, better visibility. They knew all the leads they could follow up with. I knew that everything was being worked, as planned. So it was really just a matter of sitting down and agreeing on, how to set up those reports.
Yeah.
Helping each other with the lead view there.
Makes sense.
So, communication is huge. It'll come through, I think, as we talk more about this. So really to address some of those issues we saw early on, we really implemented 3 big changes here. One of which was aligning the teams around specific lead sources. So I had, at that, or even now I do, I have a specific team to follow up on my leads. It's not, going out to various regional BDR teams or based on territory, industry, things like that. I have a specific SDR team that follows up on all of the leads I send through. So it makes it very easy for us to get it on the same page in terms of goals, in terms of numbers, what's there, what the process should be, training and things like that become much easier. We also optimize those lead sources around the most efficient at starting conversations. That was a big key too. We tend to look at the big metrics, leads, ops, conversion rates, things like that. But when we really start talking about, hey, which of these leads are really effective in you starting a conversation with somebody, not just giving you a name to call, but giving you something to talk about with them. Those are the kinds of campaigns we've really tried to optimize around. And Sales Scout has definitely given us that kind of unique insight into the prospect's company, because they're giving us these signals, these very early buying signals of companies that we might not otherwise know to address, talk to, call out to at all. But they're telling us, something's happened at this company that could make them a good fit for us. Not necessarily downloading a RingCentral white paper or something like that, but they've done something else totally, separate from what we do that is a good early indication. And those kinds of campaigns, those kinds of signals, we've really found to be very, very effective in converting leads. Another area is around the process. We've worked a lot around improving our processes, both in terms of lead routing. I mentioned that's always an issue. I'm sure other companies have this too. Salesforce is a very complicated, large beast, and lots of things can cause a lead to go not where you intended it to. So we're constantly working on not only improving that, but we've also created a process to find misrouted leads on a weekly basis and get those corrected. So we work with our ops team very closely to do that as well. So that's really helped as sort of a safety net to capture some of those misrouted leads. And then we've also got an automated process around creating and delivering leads from the Sales Scout data. It's really interesting information they're providing, but we needed to create a process to put that into a view that our SDRs can use to follow up with. And I'll go into that in a little more detail in just a minute. And then finally, training. I think we've talked about training a little bit here. We still do quarterly training, but now I do it directly with my lead suppliers, like Sales Scout. So every quarter, Chris's team does a training with our team to just to remind them of all the different signal types that they can be receiving, how to follow up on each of those sorts of things, how they're created, how to follow up, and then a little bit around talk track for each of those things too. So having that ongoing, constant reinforcement of best practices definitely has been a big, big help. In our having good conversion success there. And then just like I said, overall communication. I just can't stress that enough. As I mentioned before, we used to have like these weekly meetings with the managers, but we stopped doing those. Why? Because I talk to them 2, 3, 4 times a day. Every day of the week. It was pointless to wait for some weekly meeting when we've already talked 2 times earlier that day about various specific issues. We don't wait. There's no waiting for a meeting or a regularly scheduled discussion to address any kind of issue. If they see something's wrong or they can't find a lead or got misassigned, I hear about it like right away. And vice versa. If I see anything in the numbers that are telling me, something's wrong in the follow-up here, I'm on the phone with them right away. We don't wait. It's very open, honest, back and forth, frank feedback on everything. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you tell me these leads aren't working for you. You're going to help me do my job better. So it's real important to get that kind of back and forth, that kind of real open, honest dialogue. So anyway, this is our funnel. I'm sure all of you in your companies have something very, very similar. And this really is just shows kind of how we look at the lead flow, the different stages, how they're measured, and who takes, I'd say, primary ownership. Because as I mentioned before, we all are jointly gold up and down the funnel these days. But at the very top, we have suspects and prospects, which are primarily owned by marketing. For us, a suspect is just a name. Could be, just an email address we have in our database, a phone number, what have you. But they haven't necessarily interacted with RingCentral in any way. Whereas a prospect has. That's somebody who has, visited our website, or maybe they've downloaded a white paper or something like that. They've taken some action that tells us, okay, they at least know who we are. But that's about it. That's not considered a lead in our parlance. But then once they take enough actions, or maybe take a high value action to the point where they get scored to become a lead, they become an MQL. And that's where the SDRs or AEs, depending on the size of the company, really take ownership, primary lead of the lead. Then the SAL stage, the sales accepted lead, that's when they have either made contact or at least attempted to make contact. So that's where they're actually working the lead, basically. And then the SQL stage, that's where it gets turned over to an AE. That's after it's been pre-qualified, or if it's an AE, this is when they open up an opportunity. And this is, where it's, hey, there's potential here. There's really a potential deal, and we can scope that potential. So we open an opportunity in Salesforce, and we have 7 stages of those. I'm sure every company does this a little differently. Stage 7 is closed won. That's, at the bottom of the funnel, where we're trying to get, as many of our leads as possible too. So anyways, that's kind of ours. I'm sure you guys have a similar one. Go to the next one.
Sorry, just to jump in there, because I'm just curious for qualifying. So for both Sales Scout data and RingCentral, to get to that sales qualified lead, there's so much talk about BANT, and BANT is dead, this and that. What criteria are both of your teams using to qualify SQLs?
Yeah, our team uses a process called selling through curiosity. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. I forget the gentleman's name who is a big proponent, but anyways, it's I mean, in the most general rough terms, it is still BANT, but it's just much more detailed than that. They're getting into asking questions that allow the prospect to tell us a little more about their pain points and things like that. And then they use those to determine, likelihood of fit. And if they get past a certain threshold, that's when they would, the SDR would then turn it over to the AE. And that's where the discovery process really begins at that point. Wish I had one of my SDRs on. They could give you more detail on that, but that's our basic approach.
That makes sense. So really focusing on the pain, and then when that hits a certain threshold, it's kind of flipped over.
Yeah, certain fit, where we feel like, we can address their problem, and the customer clearly knows they have a problem, and they are in the at least planning stages for addressing that. That's when you'd want to turn it over to an AE at that point.
Awesome. And Chris?
We use human verification. I believe strongly that you can only use technology so much to source a lead, verify a lead. The magic happens when we combine our proprietary technology and sourcing with human eyeballs and intelligence. That's where you create a much higher degree of accuracy. We verify things like tech stack on site. For RingCentral and other telcos, they're looking for certain types of technology in place on premise, PBX that they're trying to displace with SD-WAN or other cloud-based services. So we zone in on those kind of technology qualifiers, and then we human verify the accuracy of the contact and the exact decision makers that our customers are looking for. And that's a little different than some of the others who will license you a data set and you get to carve that data set up all day long, but maybe there's only 20% of the data set that's really of use to you. We give our customers exactly what they want. Being in the business as long as I have, I can tell you a couple things that really work well and what doesn't. I've tested just about everything. Recency drives accuracy, and intent or event-based buying signals are at the very top of the performance curve. David mentioned earlier about how he uses signals to create a conversation. Mm-hmm. And we like to say these conversations and these buying signals turn a cold call into a warm call, and I'll give you a couple examples. Funding events. We know that a company that just raised a round of funding, closed a round of funding, is 8 times more likely to respond to a sales solicitation because they've got a growth initiative and they've got the money to spend, right? Executives who have just changed position, a new CTO, is not quite as likely to be aligned with their specific current vendors and may be more open to a discussion about changing technology. Companies that are relocating, companies that are currently in market, building a new facility or moving to a new facility offer a great opportunity for salespeople to go in and light them up with new services. So we have a variety, roughly 15 different trigger types, and we are combining intent-based data to really drive performance. And that's what we focus on, human verification and technology.
Yeah, that makes total sense. The human piece is the critical one there, I think. Thanks, gentlemen.
I think so. Yep.
Certainly. So as I mentioned, we added the Sales Scout intelligence as one of our lead sources, to get more insight. And these are some of the different signals that they're providing to us. Chris, you just mentioned a couple of. I don't know if you wanted to cover any of the others on here, but
we could go into. I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, but there are a lot of different signal types. And it really depends on what you're selling. I can tell you the ones that work really well, and they work well for RingCentral, and I think I've hit most of them: lease terminations, et cetera.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Good. So these signals are great information, but we had to integrate that with our lead flow and our lead follow-up process. Just signals in and of themselves weren't necessarily going to do anything until we could put them into our overall process. So what we did is we created a process that takes the signal. So each of these signals that would come over have associated contacts with them, and one of them is the primary contact that Chris's team provides to us. So we create a lead from that primary contact, and then we add that signal information into the lead notes of that lead, so that the SDR team has the information they need to reach out to it. We also created well, actually, before I go into that, I want to talk about accuracy, because Chris has hit on that a bit too. Critical to us to have these the data in these leads be very, very accurate, especially the contact information. Having that accurate is so important, because we're trying to reach out to the right person. We're also incorporating personalized automated communications through Marketo as these leads come in. So making sure we're sending that to the right person and sending it from the right person on our side, very, very critical. So that's another area where our improved lead routing came into play. And actually, in this particular case, we also put in another checkpoint to assign lead ownership first thing when they enter Marketo. Again, I don't want to get too much into process weeds here, but as the data would come in, generally Marketo will process them to a certain extent, sync with Salesforce. That's where the lead is assigned, and then things get routed. In this case, we actually hard code in the assignment right up front so that those emails that go out are coming from the right team. Really important. We're starting a conversation with somebody, and if it's coming from somebody who is not involved, has never heard of this campaign, our entire approach falls down before it even gets started, really. Again, data accuracy both on our side and on the information coming from Chris's team, both hugely important there. And then also, the SDRs do some call out in between this too. They do phone, and I think they're doing social media outreach on this as well. And in those other channels, they're also referencing back to the emails. Hey, just following up. So when you saw my email, if you have any questions, congratulations on the event, what have you. The other point I should mention too on the outreach is the emails that go out, the automated emails that go out are organized by the signal type. So we're not reaching out to somebody who is having a downsizing in the same way we are to somebody who is moving into a new space. That wouldn't make any sense at all. So again, the data aspect of this is critical to making all of that function effectively. And then the SDRs, lead owners, can change the lead status to stop that communications flow, because if they hear back from the lead directly, we don't need automated emails anymore. They're having a one-to-one conversation at that point. So they just flip the lead status, and that stops that whole process from happening too. So anyway, that's yeah.
David mentioned the talk tracks. I think that's a really important differentiator, because when you're dealing with buying signals, you really need to use them as an entry point into the conversation. So we spend a good deal of time working with the sales teams who are using these buying signals to try and set up those talk tracks so it's not quite as clumsy as making a cold call. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm trying to sell you ads, right? It's really about congratulating somebody on their new promotion or congratulating them on the round of funding, et cetera. And that leads into another discussion.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect transition, Chris. It's training is the next thing I wanted to talk about. And ongoing training is absolutely critical. We spend a lot of time training them on each lead source. And in this case, it gets down to, what each signal type means, what it can tell you about the customer's situation. It might give you some insight there. And then how do you use that to initiate the conversation based on the signal type? How do you start a productive discussion based on what before you even go into the phone call? I got to say, our salespeople are very, very well trained. I'm constantly impressed at the whole process that they go through before they're even turned loose, on the world. And we needed to match that in our training from marketing, so that they have all the information they need to be successful. Because they're ready to go. They come out with fire. Ready to perform, and I want to make sure I'm giving them the information they need to be as successful as possible. And especially with this kind of data that's a little different. This isn't somebody who has filled out a form on our website or anything like that. This is somebody who, again, may never have heard of RingCentral, and we're trying to introduce ourselves into that. into that situation. It's training and accuracy is critically important. And this is just, the slide shows kind of an example of how that works. But by signal type, we have this kind of information ready for the reps.
I like this.
Then one other.
Sorry,
go
just
ahead.
A comment on that, because I think a lot of, again, people, sales marketing professionals that are listening to this, traditionally, you bucket maybe by industry, or you bucket by, company size, and you run a campaign this way. But I love this idea of, training your reps on different signals instead to spark that conversation. Because, not every lead is created equal, right? Inbound leads are going to be different than outbound leads. Someone downloads a white paper versus, maybe they just jumped on your website. So David, you're saying for each one of those, each signal, they get specific training that's tailored to that unique situation?
Yeah, exactly. They get training on, whereas this slide shows where to look to even understand what the signal was and what the information is behind it. And then they get the training on what to do with that information. And we reinforce that constantly to just to remind them. And plus, we have new people coming on and off the team as time goes on, as all companies do. So there's that aspect too. But really, it's just to keep it all top of mind, make sure they remember, where to look, what looking tells them. In our case, BMID is a real critical piece of the information. That's a code that basically tells them what campaign this came from. In the lead record, they can also always get kind of a reminder of the campaign at a more general level. But then they go down to the lead notes in the case of the signals we're sending them, and they can get the really detailed information about what the signal was, where it was collected from, any details that might go along with that, because some of them will have very specific details about, the funding event, for example. Sometimes they'll have the actual information in there. And this is public record stuff, so it's not too creepy, but it's information that our people can use to initiate a conversation. This training and as specific as we can get in that training really makes them much more effective in their outreach.
I love it. And it's
at the end of the day,
right there.
Excuse me, Scott. At the end of the day, doesn't matter how good the data is in the lead, if they're calling on an inaccurate contact and they continue to call on inaccurate contacts, they aren't going to trust the lead source, right? So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would argue too there that you really only get one or two shots. And, if they mistrust one lead source, it happens 2 or 3 times, they get the wrong number. Well, they're going to, for the rest of the year or the rest of their time at the company, they're just going to, those are garbage leads. We don't touch those, even if they could be the hottest ones.
They've got numbers, but again, they aren't going to waste time.
Yeah, for sure. But again, give that feedback to your marketing people too, because then I can do something with that information. Maybe there's an issue in the data flow. Maybe that particular vendor has an issue they can address on their side. You tell me that early and often, I might be able to fix it before it becomes a critical issue like that. But for sure, accuracy can't, it makes everything work.
Really good point, David.
Yeah. So, hey, results, right? How do we deal with all this? I want to make a couple notes about that before we get too far down. Just because of these are signals. These are not your typical leads where somebody's necessarily taken an action. Our regular standard lead to op type metrics weren't terribly insightful for us because, again, they're signals. They're potential interest here. They aren't somebody who has done anything at all. And I might never have even heard of RingCentral, as I mentioned before. So we're going to generate a few more leads than you might in a typical campaign, right? So just looking at lead to op conversion, at least not initially. Over time, it equalizes a bit, but initially it wasn't really telling us anything. So we really wanted to look at more advanced, more revenue-based metrics that would tell us the real value of these leads. So we're looking at things like, pipeline created, the LTV, the lifetime value of the business generated from this campaign. We always look at things like cost per opportunity, how much we're spending to generate an opportunity. And then opportunity to close one's another one that is actually insightful in this case because, generally our opportunities are created equal. So if they're converting better, then that's telling us something. And with our improved alignment, with our improved communications and processes, and focusing on programs like Sales Scout, we've seen some great results. We've actually been able to increase our overall monthly recurring revenue by 83%. We're growing our revenue, but at the same time, we've lowered the cost per MRR by 12%. This is over the last 2+ years or so. So that's incredible. We're generating more revenue and we're doing it more efficiently as we go. And then specifically on the Sales Scout campaign, 330% above other like campaigns in 12-month bookings for us. Very large jump compared to similar campaigns. Similarly, 66% improvement on opportunity to close one. As I mentioned, that was one of the initial metrics we could look at. 5 times the typical LTV per close one. So that's telling me we're generating much, much bigger deals with this data than we were with other similar type campaigns. And then a big metric for us is the fully loaded cost per acquisition per LTV. This is basically an efficiency metric, which tells us how much do we pay to generate an acquisition, a close one deal. And this includes everything. It's not just, what I pay the vendor for the lead. It's, the salaries of the people involved in the process of qualifying and closing that deal, including mine, overhead costs of running the company. I mean, basically everything is baked into this. And then we look at it with, on LTV, not just how much revenue we generated on that initial deal, but what's the lifetime value we're going to derive from this particular customer. And people much, much smarter than me, have been able to figure out calculations for all these various things. That's how we measure everything around here. And the Sales Scout leads have been fantastic for us in this measure, 16% above the average for similar type campaigns in this ratio. So that's fantastic. That makes everybody around here very, very happy. And then, finally, I can talk a little bit about what's next. As you all know, we never stand on our past success. We never stand on our laurels. So we're working on some other things in the near future to further enhance both our alignment and our success and our measurement. One of which is around nurture streams. Currently, we have nurture streams based on company size and to a certain extent lead status, and we're looking to enhance that a little bit with really a combination of both of those and product interest, which will take our nurture, I think, to the next level and make it a little more specific to each group of individuals in our nurture. We're also working on a multi-touch attribution model. We currently look at first and last touch in different metrics, and then we kind of put all that together to give us an overall success measurement. But we're looking at getting a little more sophisticated with that and going multi-touch, as I know a lot of companies out there are. And then finally, full funnel metrics at the asset level is something else we're trying to do. So what I mean by that is being able to go to a specific white paper and measure how much revenue was derived from that white paper across all our various marketing channels. We can do that today, but it's very manual and a little bit difficult, so we don't do it as much as we should. But we're looking at a more, sort of, not, I wouldn't say automated, but just a broader viewpoint of that we can all consistently look at funnel metrics right down to an asset, not just a campaign or based on market segment or something like that. So anyways, that's some of the future enhancements there. And with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Scott.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so before we have some awesome audience questions we'll jump into. I have one more because I want to grill you on one of your upcoming initiatives, because I've been involved in one in the past and it's very, very difficult to do. Can you walk me through your thought process around your multi-touch attribution model that you're building? I feel like a lot of orgs are struggling here.
Yeah, and we have to, so I understand that. It's really quite new. We're really just working on it, so I don't have a lot of great insight and detail there, but I can tell you we're basing it on the Markov model, if anyone out there is familiar with that. And what that model basically does, it looks at past success paths to project future success paths. So if somebody, did this action, then that action, and went through that channel and did this, that's the success path that has been most effective. And then we look to distribute attribution based on somebody going through a similar path going forward. Currently, at least initially, I think what we're going to do is we're basically building a multiplier based on that model that we can apply to currently measured attribution from a given source. And then that multiplier kind of tells us what we think the multi-touch attribution would be, at least initially. But I think longer term, we're looking to get more sophisticated with that and really measure the actual touch points that happen on a channel by channel basis in successful paths. And then again, distributing the overall attribution based on what we've seen in the past has been successful. So it's pretty exciting. I can't wait to get there myself. But for now, like I said, we at least have sort of a ham-fisted multiplier we can apply to it that gives us a better sense than we have today.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, best of luck building that out. And I'm gonna bug you when you have it fully built out and hear a little bit more.
Fair enough.
Awesome. Well, yeah. If you guys are open to it, we got about 10 minutes for questions. So let's dive right into it. So we have Rob who is asking, what can we do in sales to help marketing deliver higher quality leads? Interesting question. David, I'll put that one to you first.
All right, sure, yeah, that makes sense. From my perspective, and I mentioned this just a moment ago, just really clear, honest, actionable feedback is the most important thing. You're not going to hurt my feelings, I promise you. We're not emotionally tied to any given lead source or what have you. I just need to know what's working, what isn't, and specifically what. It can't just be, well, these leads are bad. I need to know what. Like, is it the accuracy of the data that Chris brought up, or is it that the insight it's giving you isn't effective in starting a conversation, or are people saying, well, they don't remember doing whatever action supposedly they did? Whatever it might be, tell us that, because and tell us early so that we can address any process issues on our side, and B, I can go back and talk with my vendors about this input. The vendors are desperate for this kind of feedback. Every time I've ever given a vendor feedback on leads like this, even if it was very negative, they've been ecstatic to hear it. Just like, oh, God, finally something we can work with, and then we can go back and we can address these issues, hopefully. And if not, well, then I can make decisions based on that. But hopefully we can address whatever the issues are. If it's training, what have you. It's just give them that feedback. Be open and honest about it. That's really critical.
And just a follow-up question on that. So, David, how did you create an environment where SDRs and BDRs felt comfortable doing that? Because it could sound like they're complaining too, right? No one remembers downloading this. No one came to the website. How do you guys foster that feedback?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, when I walked in the door, there was already, I felt like, a very good relationship between sales and marketing. So I was lucky in that sense that there already was a cooperative feeling. But for me personally, I guess I just take the approach that we're all in this together. I don't throw things over the wall and just stamp my feet if they don't convert. I talk to them all the time, and I encourage, during training, I'm constantly saying, hey, tell me if you have any issues on this, anything comes up. I follow up with that as time goes on. Just occasionally, just drop a note. We have a product at RingCentral called Blip. It's an instant messaging type collaboration tool. We create Blip groups for the various lead teams, and we just have ongoing conversations in there about things like that. And I'll just drop notes in there from time to time. Hey, how's this particular lead source working? Or you have any issues on this? Just sort of, by my actions, showing that I care and I'm interested and I'm open to their feedback. I think in working through a lot of the process issues, we built up some of that trust too. Where they've said, I'm not seeing these leads, and I jump on the phone with them really quickly, and we go through it. We get on, we get on a shared screen, and we go through Salesforce reports together, and we build these things. And I think they've just seen over time that I'm in the same boat as they are. We all have shared goals. We all have shared objectives we're trying to reach. So let's work together. I'm a resource for them.
Love that approach. That's awesome. And Chris, your opinion on this?
Well, I think it all comes down to the shared goals, right? So when you have shared goals, you have the visibility into the metrics, and everybody is in agreement on what those metrics and processes should be. Then there's greater ownership on both sides. So this whole alignment discussion that we've had here over the last 55 minutes is really, really important. So great things happen when everybody's on the same page. And it's, like to David's point, a lot of it comes down to communication and feedback. So, but, my point is demand more from your vendors. You're paying for it, right? So,
yeah, that's a great point as well. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So we've got another question here from Neil Punatar. He wants to know, what is the best process for SDRs to follow up on a PDF download from his website?
Okay. So some advice I can give there. I would not start the conversation with a question like, did you receive your PDF okay? That sets up a yes/no question that if they say no, derails your whole conversation before it even gets started. Yeah. So what we train our SDRs on is to, you can reference it, but use what you know about whatever piece of content it is they downloaded. If it's around security, okay, well maybe they're interested in that, right? Or if it's around quality of service, maybe they're having an issue there. But just use whatever the topic is to initiate a discussion about where they're coming from. What's their situation? That's what we want to get to, because if you can get them talking about that, they will reveal pain points to you. And when you understand what their pain points are, what issues they're having with their current provider, how, like I said, these guys are trained so well. They know exactly how to attack those sorts of things. All I can do is help them uncover those. They find the issue, the pain point. They know exactly how to attack it, exactly how to talk about how we address that, and really how to move that conversation forward. That's the advice we give our SDRs. Just look more at the topic and use that to start the conversation, to ask questions that let them tell you what their issues might be.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, definitely. That's always what I would teach my team, when I was leading a BD team. Same thing. You got to focus on the actual piece of collateral. They're not really interested in you yet. So just have an honest discussion about, what they have shown interest in, and then it will basically give you information to further the conversation. Thanks. Okay, so we probably have time for one more question here. All right, so we have Alicia, and she wants to know, what have been the most effective buying signals for your team? Great question.
Yeah, Chris probably has broader knowledge of this, but for us, at Ring Central, we've found a few of them have worked better than others. For us, it's been funding events. I think the growth alert, and even the accolades has worked. We don't get as many of the accolades, but I think those three have been, from the feedback I've heard, have been the most effective, just in terms of getting getting engaged with the prospect. I haven't actually run metrics. I probably should do this, based on actual results of opportunities and pipeline and LTV and all that other fun stuff based on the trigger event. That's a little more difficult because, as I said, those things go into the lead notes. So it's not like a field I can look at in Salesforce, but I'm sure I could do it with enough work and digging. It'd be good to see that. But just from the initial feedback, those are the ones that have been most effective for our team.
Yeah, I would reiterate, it's relocations, lease terminations, executive changes, mergers and acquisitions, funding events, things like that. But, for every company, they're a little different.
Yeah, that's true.
Makes total sense. All right, gentlemen. Well, I think that is our time. So I just wanted to quickly, throw it back to you guys and Chris, so how does Sales Scout help sales and marketing professionals today?
Well, we are a B2B sales intelligence platform. We are a data as a service organization, but we provide very high touch service. We work with the sales and marketing teams. As I mentioned early on, there are different agendas. Sales just wants to close. They want to work the best leads at the top and on their way down, and marketing has a much bigger agenda. So we work with very big brands, and we do really good work.
Awesome. So if people are struggling with alignment, data, buying signals, any of that, come check you guys out.
Yeah.
Awesome. And David, over at Ring Central.
Yeah, we are a very dynamic, growing, I dare say, so far successful communications and collaboration company. We really, our roots were in voice over IP, but we've grown well beyond that. We're really all about empowering teams to work together, to be, better in touch. We use our tools internally, and it's a big part of the communications between me and my sales teams. It's made a big improvement on our collaboration abilities and our communications back and forth. We're very strong in mobile and distributed work type environments. A very sophisticated, broad communications platform. I highly encourage anybody to check us out if you're in the market for that. I use it all day, every day. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks.
They're a great partner of ours. Great partner.
Awesome. And yeah, so if anyone, on this does want to get in touch with David, Chris, or myself, here's our emails and even our phone numbers. Crazy guys that we are. Just putting that out in the public realm. But yeah, that's our time. Thank you both very much for all your insight. It was truly invaluable. And of course, everyone who joined us today, thank you for your time and attendance.